With an enormous size, a piercing stare, and a very distinctive bill, the Shoebill Stork certainly carries one of the most striking visuals in the animal kingdom. However, this fabulous appearance is not the only special characteristic of this bird, which is full of mysteries and particularities. From unusual behaviors in parental care to hunting techniques completely outside the standard, it is exactly these and some other impressive curiosities about this fantastic bird that we have gathered to present in today's video. Giant bill. When looking at the Shoebill Stork, one of the first things that draws attention is certainly its bill. And this is not by chance, considering that this enormous shoe-shaped bill, which is formed by extremely dense keratin plates, gives such a unique appearance to this bird that it even ended up becoming part of the animal's popular name. Anyone who looks at this species' bill can easily say that it is one of the widest and most voluminous among all modern birds, and this is certainly not an exaggeration, considering that this bill can measure up to 30 centimeters in length. However, what many people do not imagine is that, despite the large size, it is also extremely useful and versatile, with a sharp curvature at the upper tip, which stands out as a natural blade. And despite seeming heavy, this bill is surprisingly balanced with the size of the bird's head and does not hinder and nor prevent any of its activities or movements. Living dinosaur. When referring to the Shoebill Stork, many people generally tend to describe it as a true living dinosaur, and in a way that is not an exaggeration. This is because although large reptiles such as crocodiles are often associated as being closer to dinosaurs in the popular imagination, in reality it is birds that carry the most direct connection with those animals. However, while most modern birds evolved into lighter, more aerodynamic and colorful designs, the Shoebill Stork retained a primitive anatomical set that makes many people, when seeing its appearance, think, "Wow, that creature looks like a living dinosaur." And well, yes, it really is, but not more than a hummingbird or a sparrow like the ones we usually find in our daily lives out there, for example. Terrifying sound. Now, leaving the visual aspects aside a little, let's talk about the very particular sound that the Shoebill Stork is capable of producing, and that most of the time ends up scaring many people. This is because the unusual sound that this bird produces, generated by the rapid clattering of the mandibles of its bill, is often defined by many as similar to the shots of some rifle, which in some cases can end up scaring some unsuspecting people who do not know that in reality, all that sound that seems like the soundtrack of an action movie is simply coming from a bird. Future generation. The reproductive cycle of the Shoebill Stork is as unique as its appearance. Everything begins with the construction of a gigantic nest, usually built on platforms of floating vegetation in the swamps and flooded environments where the species lives. After that, the female lays 1 to 3 large eggs, with a resistant shell and whitish coloration, which are incubated for about 30 days, in a period in which the adults alternate shifts with extreme precision. After that time, the chicks are born, with grayish down, and a bill proportionally much smaller than that of the adults, but which grows quickly during the following weeks, a period in which the parents remain beside the nest, protecting and feeding the young with absolute dedication. Silent predator. Some birds fly tirelessly until they reach their prey, others dive to catch them. But that is certainly not the case of the Shoebill Stork, which follows a totally opposite path and hunts without doing absolutely anything. Well, or almost nothing. This is because the hunting strategy of this fascinating bird basically consists of staying completely still for long periods, almost like a living statue, while it waits for some unsuspecting prey to approach the perfect range, so that the bird finally breaks the silence and performs an attack movement so fast and unexpected that most of the time it allows no chance of escape. Piercing gaze. Have you ever in your life had that feeling of being analyzed by someone who does not look away even for a second? Whether in front of a judge during a trial in court, or with some teacher during a test at school, I think we can all agree that this feeling of constant observation is something truly uncomfortable, and the Shoebill Stork certainly manages to convey this better than anyone. This is because, similar to the cases in which it is hunting as we have just seen, in which it keeps its gaze fixed for long periods, without shifting focus, and without showing the micro-adjustments that most birds naturally perform, the Shoebill Stork often also decides to direct that piercing stare at visitors and photographers, conveying a clear sensation of observing and evaluating, detail by detail. Like, for example, this one here that reminds me a lot of my boss when I ask if I can take Monday off. Species at risk. Despite the size, the rigid posture, and the appearance that many interpret as intimidating, the Shoebill Stork is currently in a fragile position within its own environment. This is because it is considered by the National Union for Nature Conservation as vulnerable to extinction, with estimates indicating that there are currently only between 5,000 and 8,000 of these birds in the wild. Flying giant. When it comes to large birds, a common thought that comes to many people's minds is that they cannot fly. After all, large birds such as the ostrich and the cassowary are a great example of that. However, this is not the case of the Shoebill Stork, which, even being able to reach up to 1.40 meters in height, is capable of flying with elegance. And the most curious thing about all this is that its wing beat rhythm is one of the slowest among all birds, considering that most of the time, it only manages to flap its wings 150 times per minute. For comparison purposes, if we consider hummingbirds, which are known for having the fastest wing beats among birds, that number can reach up to 4,800 wing beats per minute. War survivor. World War II certainly left scars on everyone involved, and animals were no exception to that. The proof of this is that during a devastating bombing in 1943, a zoo in Berlin, in Germany, was partially reduced to rubble, and hundreds of animals died. However, among the few survivors, and defying all odds, there was a Shoebill Stork. This is because after the bird's aviary was destroyed, a zookeeper named Heinrich Schwarz, together with his daughter Elisabeth Jost, also a keeper at the place, decided to take the bird home and shelter it in their bathroom, where they cared for it for months. Unexpected behavior. Certainly, if judged only by appearance, the Shoebill Stork would easily earn a place among the most dangerous birds in the world due to its frightening appearance. But the reality is different. This is because, despite the motionless posture and the visual that scares at first glance, this bird is surprisingly calm and accepts very well the presence of keepers and researchers in captivity without showing aggressiveness or stress. In this way, it is not rare to find records in which individuals show themselves cooperative in handling activities, accept manual feeding, and are even petted by their keepers or visitors. Famous on the internet. If you have already spent enough time on the internet, it is very likely that you have already come across the intimidating stare of the Shoebill Stork in some image or video. After all, even if it is not dangerous as its exaggerated reputation suggests, it is impossible to deny that it still has one of the most striking and intimidating visuals among all animals. And of course, the internet could not miss the chance to joke about this. And so the bird ended up becoming an iconic figure in meme culture in recent years, with its serious expression spread across thousands of edits in images and short videos, with probably the most famous example being this video here that shows a Shoebill Stork standing in the rain while staring directly into the camera, generating the most varied types of comparison on social media out there. Inside the game. Being an internet phenomenon is probably anyone's dream, but what many people do not know is that even before becoming a meme sensation and getting super popular online, the Shoebill Stork had already achieved another kind of fame. This is because it inspired the look of one of the main creatures in the game, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, released by Nintendo in 2011. In the game, a creature called Loftwing carries the protagonist through the skies, and according to the developers themselves, the design of this fictional bird was inspired directly by the Shoebill Stork, with a wide and curved bill, a robust head, and a serious posture. Low oxygen. Okay, we have already seen that the presence of the Shoebill Stork is constant and strongly linked to swampy areas, but what many people do not know is that there is a very specific reason for these animals to prefer these places. This is because in many of these swamps, the water contains very low levels of oxygen due to the accumulation of organic matter and the almost non-existent circulation. In these conditions, several fish, popularly known as lungfish, cannot extract enough oxygen only from the water, and therefore need to regularly rise to the surface to breathe. And it is in this way that the Shoebill Stork manages to use this behavior to its advantage, by staying motionless and taking advantage of the right moment to attack with precision when any of these fish emerges. Fighting for the inheritance. Habitat loss, illegal trade, and climate change. All these are factors that contribute to the status of vulnerable to extinction of the shoebill stork. But would you believe me if I told you that another factor that decreases the population of these animals is actually themselves? That's right, I'm not joking. This is because although the female usually lays 2 eggs, hardly both chicks survive. And the reason for this is that the first chick to hatch, generally bigger and stronger, usually attacks and intimidates the smaller sibling, even injuring it seriously, and even expelling it from the nest. To aggravate this situation even further, in many cases the second chick to hatch is neglected by the parents themselves, who usually consider it as a kind of reserve or plan B in case something happens to the firstborn. And thus, in cases in which the first chick thrives, the younger one generally goes hungry and perishes. At first glance, this behavior may even seem cruel, but in reality it is something quite common among large birds, and it aims to ensure that at least one healthy chick survives when food resources are scarce. Nest guardians. In the flooded plains of Bangweulu in Zambia, an unprecedented initiative has been changing the course of the shoebill stork. This is because, since 2012, local residents have been trained and paid to act as nest guards, watching day and night over the eggs and chicks of this rare bird during the breeding season. In this way, the guards record behaviors and drive away predators, and not to mention that their mere presence in these places already scares off hunters. However, another interesting strategy in the conservation of this species, and which in my opinion is the most ingenious of all, consists of rescuing those reserved chicks that would normally die in the nest and raising them with great care in rehabilitation centers where they are prepared to later be reintroduced into their natural habitat. Necessary lie. The idea of saving reserved chicks, as we have just seen, is truly brilliant. But it is not enough to only feed and protect. It is also necessary to ensure that they grow up believing that they are really part of the species and do not become too tame with humans, losing their natural defense instinct. To solve this, the projects in Bangweulu adopted a solution as creative as it is effective: realistic puppets with the shape and colors of the adult bird used during the feeding and handling of the chicks, with the goal that, when they are released back into the swamps, they act and feel like any other individual in nature, without strangeness, without behavioral vices, and with a much greater chance of surviving on their own. Teamwork. Among the most unexpected peculiarities of the shoebill stork is the fact that it benefits from the presence of one of the heaviest and most dangerous animals on the African continent, the hippopotamus. This is because as these aquatic giants walk or dive in shallow areas, they stir up the mud, scare away fish, and force several species to rise to the surface to breathe. Well, and after that, you already know who is nearby, waiting for this opportunity, right? Long life. The shoebill stork is a bird that lives a long time. This is because in the wild, its life expectancy is about 30 to 35 years, while in captivity, they can surpass 50 years, according to zoo records. This longevity is linked to its slower metabolism, its low reproductive rate, and the calm and solitary lifestyle that the bird adopts most of the time, which is a rare case among birds, especially in tropical regions, where most species have shorter life cycles. Strategic cooling. Well, maybe now you are even angry or indignant at the fact that shoebill storks neglect and leave one of their chicks aside in many cases. But in compensation, while they are not yet born, these birds take very good care of all their eggs. And the proof of this is that during incubation, the shoebill stork adopts a curious behavior that few people know, and that consists of wetting its own eggs to control the temperature. As their nests are usually in extremely hot areas exposed to the sun, this species learned to use water to its advantage, and thus the adults walk to the water's edge, fill their gigantic bill, and then return and gently pour the liquid over the eggs to help cool them and prevent excessive heat from harming the development of the chicks. Unlikely greeting. And to finish our list, here is an idea. If one day you have the opportunity to meet a shoebill stork in some zoo or conservation center, try leaning forward slowly and moving your head, because there is a good chance that it will return the gesture. This behavior, known as bowing, has been widely documented among individuals accustomed to human presence, such as in zoos, for example. In these places, keepers and visitors often perform the movement as a form of greeting, and the bird responds with a slow tilt of the head, creating a curious and almost symbolic moment that, according to specialists, is the result of an observation and repetition reflex. That is, it is not exactly a formal greeting, but a learned association or a form of recognition. But what about you? Do you know any other interesting fact or curiosity about the shoebill stork? Share it with us down in the comments. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.